open. It's a public hearing of the Joint Standing Committee on Migration for the inquiry into the value of skilled migration to Australia and Canberra. I welcome the witnesses appearing before the committee today, as well as members of the public and media in the room and watching online. In accordance with the committee's resolution of the 31st of July 2025, this hearing will be broadcast on the Parliament's website, and the proof and official transcripts of the proceedings will be published on the Parliament's website. Those present are advised that filming or recording by the media is permitted during the hearing. However, we ask that members of the media present or listening report the committee's proceedings fairly and accurately. I remind the witnesses appearing today that the House and Senate have resolved that an officer of the Department of Commonwealth shall not be asked to give opinions on matters of policy and shall be given a reasonable opportunity to refer questions asked of the officer to superior officers or to a minister. These resolutions do not preclude questions asking for explanations of policies or factual questions about when and how policies were adopted. I now welcome our first two witnesses, and our only witnesses, I think, for the day, from the Australian Bureau of Statistics to give their evidence, and we thank them for appearing. And can I ask, for the Hansard record, would you please state your names and the capacity in which you appear before the committee? If we can start off with either one. Ms Cho?
Hi, I can start. Thank you, Chair. My name is Beidai Cho. I'm the Acting Program Manager for Population Statistics Branch at the Australian Bureau of Statistics.
Thank you. Ms Dobek?
And thank you. I'm Jenny Dobak, and my role is the Director of Migration, Overseas Migration and Migrant Statistics at the Bureau of Statistics.
Thank you. Although the committee does not require you to give evidence under oath, this hearing is a legal proceeding of the Parliament. The giving of false or misleading evidence is a serious matter and may be regarded as a contempt of Parliament. The evidence given today will be recorded by Hansard and attracts parliamentary privilege. So thank you for your submission to the inquiry, and now I'll invite you to make a short statement, which will be followed with just an informal question and discussion around the things that you're doing. I ask that you keep your statement very short, just to a few minutes, and we'll explore everything when we're talking. So a lot of things may be repeated when we're asking questions, so keep it very short. Who's making the statement, Ms Dobak or Ms Cho?
Yes,
Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, good morning, and thank you very much for the opportunity to appear before this committee today. As I already mentioned, I'm Jenny Dobak, Director of Overseas Migration and Migrant Statistics, and I'm here with Acting Program Manager for Population Statistics Branch, Beidai Cho. We provided a submission to this inquiry to outline the ABS data sets which can support the committee's inquiry across economic, social and settlement outcomes. And today we'll be happy to highlight some data of interest and to take any questions. We do use a lot of our data sources, refer to census data. It's a really valuable data set for us, integrated with migration data from the Department of Home Affairs. We're really looking at the census year being 2026, and we're really looking forward to being able to update that census data as soon as the new data becomes available. But it is a very, very, very valuable source which underpins a lot of our statistics. And just to close, I can just mention some of the. I don't want to go through too much of our statistics. It might come up in questions after, but. Census data linked to migration data to produces the ACMID data set, the Australian Census Migrant Integrated Data Set. And some of the highlights from what we can present to you are such statistics that skilled migrants show strong employment outcomes with 81% employed. We can provide statistics about primary skilled applicants and secondary skilled applicants, so it can drill down to levels of detail. We can show that skilled migrants contribute through community engagement and are able to provide those numbers from the census integrated data set. And we can show that skilled migrants work in critical occupations. So that's just a a flavour of the type of statistics that we have. And to close, we do endeavour to provide, and we do provide high quality independent statistics. And we're really, happy to be here today to support any of your further inquiries and questions.
Thank you very much. Is there anything you'd like to add, Ms Cho? No, Ms Cho can't hear me, I don't think. That's okay. We'll go straight to questions. I might kick off with a couple of just two quick questions. I think Ms Cho is having problems hearing us.
Mr. Chair.
I am. I'm not having trouble hearing, but I'm just having trouble with my mute button. But no, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you for speaking to us. Can I just ask a question about the ABS and the type of insight that you could give the committee in terms of any stats that are kept that show the economic value or contribution of migration? I'm sure you have them, particularly skilled migration to Australia. You did mention, Ms Dobak, that you do sort of drill down into these particular numbers. But is there anything that you're holding that actually can provide some insight to the committee to the economic value and contribution of migration, particularly skilled migrants to Australia? And you mentioned a quick stat there, I think 80% of full employment or something, but...
Certainly. We can provide such, so we have two data sources: personal income in Australia and jobs in Australia. And for instance, we can show that for the figure 8 is for skilled migrants' personal income for the year 2023 to 22 to 23 is 80,166. That's in a year. That's a year median income. So we can provide that number. We can compare that against all personal migrant or permanent migrants. For example, in the 2022-23 year, looking at 15 to 64-year-olds who receive personal income, we can have a look at such numbers that 83% receive a personal income, and personal income from those integrated data sets we can use where we don't have a labour force participation rate, because it's a really good indicator of labour force participation. And we can see that 88% of skilled permanent migrants earn a personal income. That compares to 79% for the total Australian population. So that's the kind of information that helps give that comparative of the value of skilled migrants to Australia, where I think the comparison is really important.
Thank you. In terms of that's great, and that shows income compared to the average, I suppose, and it seems to be a little bit higher than the average. But in terms of the economic value, has there been any? It may not be your place to do this at the Australian Bureau of Statistics, but are you aware of any research or stats that show for that average of $80,166, the economic impact in the community? And as I said, it may not be the ABS's job to do that, but other researchers, etc. But you might be aware of some research or something.
Yeah, we can certainly provide information through to you about other research. I am aware that there have been some studies by the Productivity Commission, which we've supported with data in the past. The migration data, there's a lot of research projects we talk about the personal level integrated data asset, that's PLIDA. And there's a lot of projects that come through from researchers looking at that kind of angle. We do provide, we have a lot of data, but to do the analysis, to go to the next step about what that value is, we do leave to the researchers, but certainly happy to provide any that we're aware of out of session. Excellent.
Thank you. If there is anything, be really appreciative if you could send it through. Anything that sort of hits out, that's
Do
pretty.
that.
Yeah, thank you. My last question, and then I'll hand over to the committee, is the NOM, or the net overseas migration figure in recent months. So there's been some attention around it. There's been considerable attention actually around it. Just for the benefit of the committee, can you explain to us and tell us how the NOM is, or how it's calculated, and what does it tell us about migration in Australia? That's the net overseas migration figure. How does the calculation done? And
Okay, so we follow the UN guidelines around how the ABS calculates net overseas migration. So we have a 12 out of 16 rule that we apply. So when we calculate net overseas migration, we calculate a migration arrival for those people that come to Australia and they're in the country for a 12-month period out of 16. The reason why we have the 16 is because it's reasonable that in that period, the 12 months, people may come and go. Students might go and visit home or whatever. So it doesn't have to be a continuous period, but 12 out of 16 months, they become a migrant arrival. And with a migrant departure, likewise, when you're out of the country for a 12 out of 16 month period, then you're taken out of the population because you're considered to be a migrant departure. So how we do that, every month we get overseas excellent. We're very lucky in Australia that we have got excellent data from the Department of Home Affairs, and we get information on overseas arrivals and departures. And there's a lot of noise and their movements, and that's why we don't recommend data from the overseas arrivals and departures. Will be actually quite strong messaging that data isn't a measure of migration, but what is when we take it and we look at it over time and we start understanding whether people are going to be a migrant arrival or a departure, whether they're going to be part of the population. We are able to, so we don't have to wait. Thank you to sophisticated modelling. We don't need to wait until the 16-month period is over to be able to say if someone is a migrant arrival. We do know after that period we finalise the estimates, but we have some provisional estimates that we can provide at 6 months after an arrival, because we start to look at the data, and through modelling and propensities, we can anticipate whether they're going to be a migrant arrival. But I will defer. I'll just throw open to Beta in case you'd like to add to that explanation at all.
I was just going to add that our latest numbers, which we released last week, was that net overseas arrivals was 311,000 for the 12 months to September 2025. And that number is a little bit higher than the previous number that we released in
sorry,
June.
Can I interrupt you there?
Yeah, sure.
So that last month's numbers were, can you repeat that again? I didn't quite hear.
It was last week's numbers.
Yep.
It's 311,000.
Okay, thank you.
Net overseas migrants into the population, yes.
That's not, is that 311,000 extra migrants in 1 month?
So that's an annualised figure.
Annualised.
That's
okay.
for the 12 months to September 2025.
Thank you. Sorry for interrupting. Just wanted to clarify that point.
No, sorry for that. I wasn't clear. But I was just going to, just mention that, following COVID and the closure of international borders, we are seeing that net overseas migration numbers move around a little bit as, the arrivals and departure patterns just kind of normalises. That's what I was going to add. Thanks.
Thank you. I might hand over to the Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ms Cho and Ms Dobak, for presenting to the committee today. I am just interested in the currency of the migration data, and so Ms Dobak, you spoke about a few figures, and looking at the dates on which those figures were put together, some of them are a couple of years old. I'm just wanting to know, during periods of rapid migration change, for example, when we've had large increases in net overseas migration over the last few years, how does the ABS ensure that policymakers and also the general public are not relying on outdated data?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question, because obviously relevant, timely data is definitely a key objective. There are some limitations. We have got administrative data has really propelled us forward quite significantly in the amount of information that we can access on all a variety of topics. But there's still some real limitations. We do rely on personal income tax data to provide information on jobs, but this is intersensely, because we do rely on the census every 5 years, of course. But intersensely, personal income tax data is a key data source for us, and there are some very real limitations about that. That there is a lag. We are working on ways that can be reduced, but the lag is so that it's quality, because it's always a balance between timeliness and high quality information. And for instance, the tax data, when it makes its way to us, you need to complete the financial year, and then tax records will still come in until a certain point. And then there's a period of quality and cleanup that the tax department have to do before it comes to us. So there's a 15 to 18 month lag in that, and then it comes to the ABS. More curation and quality checks and confidentiality, of course, and both organisations will take a lot of care in that. And then it makes its way to the PLIDA data set. So it's a lag, but it's the balance between quality and timeliness. And you just have to be aware that it is the latest. It is the latest data, and think about the environmental context about that. So, for instance, when we were looking at tax data that covered the COVID period and the pandemic, we were thinking about that period of time. We needed to think about, what was going on in the environment, what was happening with migrants in the country, what was the impact on jobs over that period of time. So you kind of balance what you know about the environment and the timeliness of the data as well. But we are doing everything. The Bureau does everything it can, of course, across all the analytical data sets in PLIDA, to work with data custodians to get the most recent data into the assets that we can access it.
Thank you. And
yeah, it is a very real limitation. Sorry.
Thank you. And can you just tell me, so on that, are there any plans to move towards more real-time or near real-time migration statistics? And in doing so, is there any funding or support that is required to achieve that?
There's conversations all the time, particularly between ABS, I'm aware, and our colleagues at the Department of Home Affairs, into how we can possibly improve the migration data in terms of the completeness of migration records, and we do have very good migration records that come on the administrative data, but in the PLIDA data set, we need to make sure that we capture those migrants in that data set. And some of the limitations, sorry, I am talking around a bit because I'll come back to your direct question. We do talk about things that we can do to have migrants appear there quicker. So we wait for when a migrant interacts with the tax system, when it interacts with Medicare, when a migrant interacts with and this is everyone, really, actually, not just migrants, but everyone who interacts with social services, they get captured on the PLIDA spine. But there are some limitations about why that isn't real time, because they need to appear on the Home Affairs records to then appear and then start interacting with those services. So real time is very difficult. Real time is very tricky.
Thank you.
But certainly anything that we can do to have migrants appear in PLIDA or get into the Home Affairs records we are aware of. So there possibly would be some funding that would help look at how migrants can appear on settlement database quicker. I'm not sure that is for my colleagues at Department of Home Affairs, but we can certainly, that could be something that we would be keen to explore offline as well.
Thanks very much.
Ms. Fernando.
Can I just add that? Sorry, can I add just one quick comment?
Ms.
Is
Chair.
that real time is difficult because we do really need to verify and qualify the information as well. We've experienced that with real-time data. There is a lot of revisions and a lot of things that are cleaned up. So we also wait for the quality of a certain level of quality from the information before we can accept it and turn it into, I guess, statistics. You know, what data comes in, but we have a lot of processes that we need to apply to turn them into statistics that you can then trust and use in a coherent way.
Thank you. I'll go to Ms. Fernando, then to Senator Lee.
Thank you, Ms. Dobak and Ms. Chow. I've got a couple of questions. So my first one is, given your own data shows skilled migrants have the strongest employment and income outcomes of any migrant cohort, do you think the national conversation on migration is too often distorted by aggregated numbers that fail to distinguish between very different migrant streams? That's one. The second one is, does the ABS have any data that provides insight on the impact of migrants on housing and infrastructure in Australia? And one of the last couple of ones I have is, how does the ABS migration data and statistics compare to that collected by similar agencies in like-minded countries such as Canada and New Zealand? And is there anything that other countries are doing that could be beneficial for Australia? Last three questions, I think. And that's us.
Thank you. Can I just ask you to go back to the first question? Would that be okay?
Bells are ringing.
I'll have to interrupt you there. Our bells are ringing for a division.
Do you want to close it?
We can. I think we'll try and come back if you've got time. Maybe 5-10 minutes at the most. If not, we can close the meeting. And I apologise for this, but I think we'll just, if that's okay, we'll recess, and if we need to, we can close it. Thank you. I'll see you all back up here. So we suspend the.
Should we just stay on the line, or should we just log out?
Stay on the line.
Cho and Ms Doback, we are going to resume whilst the bells are ringing for some of our colleagues, but we've got enough of people here to keep going. So without further ado, I'll pass to Senator Blythe to continue some of the questions.
Thank you very much, Deputy Chair. I'd just like to talk a little bit about international students. Now, the ABS published on its website an article called Recording of International Students in the Balance of Payments, and it included that this expenditure contributed $53.6 billion to Australia's exports in the 24-25 financial year. The ABS would be aware that there is growing scepticism of how international student revenue is reported in national accounts. The ABS is counting international education as an export. Can you explain in basic terms how the value of that export for international students is calculated?
So I'll just unmute. That would be something that's not in our sphere of expertise. So what we'd like to do is to provide that information. We'll follow up with that out of session, if that's okay.
So you'll provide that on notice? Yep. And
Yes.
and there's no other modelling that the ABS undertakes in relation to...
We can confirm that.
Okay.
We'll take that on notice.
Okay, so does the ABS, and I guess comparing that to tourists that you have, so we've got international tourists and we've got international students, does the ABS have anything that takes into account that international students perhaps don't contribute to the economy in the same way as international tourists? In terms of what they spend, they tend to come here, they will be living on a budget, so they're not necessarily going out to restaurants, going to shows, that sort of thing.
I'm not aware of any.
We don't do any of that particular. Sorry, there's a delay. I was just going to say we're going to have to take that one on notice as well to see. We're not aware of any, but I will double check and take that on notice.
Okay, and is the ABS, do you take into account or take note of income earned by international students?
We would be able to find some information about international students in our data, but when I spoke about limitations in our data asset plighter, they are one of the populations that are hard to capture because, for those that are earning, but not everyone, not all students earn an income. Being temporary, there's a lag, so it's probably an area where we could provide some information. It might not be complete.
Okay. Can I just clarify whether there is anyone, and if you can take this on notice as well, whether perhaps there are any of your colleagues that may be more appropriate to answer those types of questions for us, and perhaps we could ask them to reappear.
Yeah, we can definitely check.
If you could take that on notice, that would be great. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Chair.
Thank you, Senator Blythe. Senator, Mr Caldwell.
Thank you. Thank you for appearing today. So one of the things you mentioned at the outset, Ms Doback, was just in relation to the settlement component of skilled migration. So just with that lens on, you'll be aware that the 2023-24 survey of income and housing was not released by the ABS due to some data issues. There was a press release put out in 2025 explaining, effectively this was now going to be a gap in the data set, which is a critical source of information on household size, which gives us a sense of the pressure of population growth, which principally can be driven by migration on housing supply. So have you got an update on any alternative sources that could shed light on the household size and the status of subsequent surveys of income and housing that could give us an updated read on that relationship?
We can talk about, we do have census data that can provide information about housing tenure. That's going back to 2021. I am aware that the next survey of income and housing, the 25-26 survey will be due for release, and I would have to take on notice that release date, but I believe it's not so far away. Yeah, we'd have to take that on notice about the actual date of release.
Okay. And so just going back to some of your data modelling, I was interested in the fact that you sort of have some forecasting that's available that's quite effective. So just as an example, in the year of 22-23, there was a Treasury forecast of net overseas migration of 235,000. The actual net overseas migration for the 12-month period was about 538,000. Now, is it the case that you had modelling at a fairly early point in that 12-month period where you could have identified, or did identify in fact, that Treasury modelling was going to be a long way out of whack?
I can take that one if you like. So, yes, thank you for the question. When Jenny talked about modelling before, it was in reference to preliminary net overseas migration, and that basically what it is we don't wait for 16 months for a traveller to back in Australia or for a resident come back or depart. We actually do modelling to gauge their probability of being population or outside of the population based on characteristics from a similar person 12 months ago. So that's the modelling she's talking about. It's not a forecast sort of modelling. So what we release is the actual number, and it is even though part of it is modelling, it is pretty close to an estimate. And whenever we have that available at release time, Treasury also has access to that. So there's nothing that we have that can, that is in advance of what we release. So I guess it's quite a complex way of saying there was no way for us to know that it wasn't going to, meet Treasury's forecast. We do it quite independently from Treasury.
Thank you.
Sorry, just Mr. Chair.
Just to let you know that we've returned back to the meeting. Ms. Fernandez and Louise Miller-Frost and myself, the chair. Thank the deputy chair. Because of the time restraint, I know that Miss Louise Miller-Frost has a question as well, and then we'll come back to you guys if we've got time.
I don't think they answered my question.
No, probably Miss Fernandez.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we will go back. Do you recall the question that Miss Fernando asked?
I don't think so.
You might want
I think we're just about the first one that was talking about aggregated migrant statistics. Was that the theme?
Okay.
Yeah. Would you be able to just repeat that for us?
Given your own data shows skilled migrants have the strongest employment and incomes of any migrant cohort, do you think the national conversation on migration is too often distorted by the aggregated numbers that fail to distinguish between very different migrant streams?
Yeah, I think that to really understand migrant outcomes, you do need to look at them by stream. So when you do look at migrants as a whole and talk about them at the high level, it can certainly mask some of their individual attributes and characteristics, income contributions, working outcomes. So different streams have different conditions of entry, which do definitely affect their labour market outcomes. For instance, skilled stream migrants, we know through their conditions of entry that they've got higher levels of often have higher levels of English proficiency, and they have a different outcome for their education and work experience. Humanitarian migrants aren't selected on the basis of those types of attributes, so they have very different outcomes. So you do have to be very careful. It's the way you do need to look at migrant outcomes is at the more disaggregated level and their entry conditions.
So thank you. My other question was, does the ABS have any data that provides insights on the impact of migrants on housing and infrastructure in Australia?
I think the leap to talk about the impact, we don't, not that I'm aware of, not certainly in my area of expertise. We can certainly provide information. Those linked census data sets to migration data are able to, by visa stream, have a look at whether a migrant's renting or they own a home and have a mortgage. We do know about characteristics of their dwelling, but we don't do analysis about the impact.
Okay. And my last question.
Be the last one.
Yeah, this was my last question. How does the ABS migration data and statistics compare to that collected by similar agencies in like-minded countries such as Canada and New Zealand? And is there anything other countries are doing that could benefit for our country?
Are you talking about migration or migrants? Sorry.
Yeah, migration.
So the measurement of migration. So I can report that for New Zealand, they use a similar model to the one we use in Australia. And I guess with Australia and New Zealand both being island nations, our statistics are good because we can, very accurately record international border crossings. And have good relationships with the departments that do collect it. In Canada, however, they do have sometimes quite porous boundaries with America, so their definition is not as tight as ours, but we certainly know that the ABS and New Zealand model is a very, very good, accurate model.
Okay. Do you want to go, Louis?
Thank you, Ms. Fernando. I'll now ask Ms. Louise Miller-Frost to ask a few questions.
Thank you, Chair. Look, thank you so much for appearing today. I'll actually start by just complimenting your very excellent social media, which is highly entertaining. So well done on that. And I'm interested in whether the ABS does anything to actually correct misinformation or misuse or misinterpretation of data in social media, in the media, in anywhere. And I'm looking at particularly, for instance, the Australian Electoral Commission does actually jump on misinformation when it's out there. I realise it's an ongoing and very big job. But we've seen some really wild numbers out there, 1 million and plus. And you're telling us that net overseas migration is 311,000 in the past 12 months. Do you actually do any proactive or reactive campaigns to try and address the misinformation or misuse of your data?
I'll take that one. Thanks for the question, and thanks. The social media. I'll pass that on to our social media team. Thank you so much for that comment. So we keep a close eye on social media, and where we think we do need to add clarification, we do, but we don't always get involved with the commentary. And I guess sometimes we just keep a watching brief on it. But I guess a time where we felt like we did need to put in a clear clarification was when we put out a media statement last year, August last year, about the use of permanent and long-term movements as a measure of migration, which was what some media commentaries were using as a measure of migration. They were using net permanent long-term movements. So in that particular instance, we felt that it was useful to put out a clear media statement. So we did do that. So it is on a case-by-case basis, but we do keep a close eye on our social media commentary.
Thank you. And is there any data on migration that we're not currently collecting that you think would be valuable to collect? And if so, are there any particular barriers other than obviously money?
We are very fortunate that we do have the gold class migrant.
Yeah.
Sorry, Beta, I'll defer. I've got a lag.
Oh, no, that's okay. It just seems to be a pretty bad lag with us. So I think we were about to say the same thing, is that our measurement of migration is, I think, one of the best. It is, I would claim it's the best, and we are able to follow the UN definition without exception to what they define.
Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
It's Steve Georgianis, the chair here. Can I just go back to something that Ms Louise Miller-Frost just raised, and that is earlier on when you gave us the explanation of the 12-16 rule, you told us last week's figures were 311,000 and using that 12-16 rule. Where is it that we get reports of 1 million migrants, 1.5 million I've heard, 800,000, 900,000. Are there any other formulas that perhaps media or other people are using, or how do they clarify those numbers when we hear them? We've just heard that the official ABS statistics are 311,000 for the year using the 12-16 formula, which is a very reasonable formula, I think, to use. Where do these other figures come from? Have you done any investigating, or how do they come about?
There's some people look to the overseas arrivals and departures data. There's a data we produce on permanent and long-term arrivals, but that's in the overseas arrivals and departures data publication. It's not migration data, but they are often misused as migration data. So sometimes they're picked up, and it's those figures like that are quoted. That doesn't come to the million, but we do, and that's where we do really strongly point out that's not the right data source. It's misleading to use that, because that data picks up a lot of movement, and you can be already resident and counted as a permanent, as a migration arrival in our data, but you can travel for work, holiday, whatever reason. When you come back into the country, you come back in that data set as a long-term arrival. So, but you're already counted. So there's a lot of, if you use that data, there's double counting, and we do really try and clarify that. There's other, actually I'll pause there just to see if Beta would like to add to that at all.
I was just going to link that back to the media statement, and that was the, I guess, the misuse of the permanent and long-term movement data that we felt like needed to be clarified. So that was, I guess, one of the reasons why we did clarify the use of the PLT versus the official net overseas migration figure.
Thank you. So what you're saying there is that some of these figures come out by counting the total intake, but not looking at the outgoing. In other words, if you're a permanent resident, you've already come here, you've already settled here, you may go for a holiday back to your home country, then upon entrance, you'd be counted twice. Is that what you were saying? Yeah. Okay. So
yes.
Yeah, okay. When these...
That's it. It's counting movements, and we count actual people in net overseas migration, rather than just the number of movements across the border. So when these false figures come out, which aren't based on fact and the Australian Bureau of Statistics, is there a process in place by the ABC? I know, it may not be your place to react and go out, but is there a process in place where you try to rectify it by perhaps
contacting Home Affairs, or do you have a process in place to say, well, here's the official figures, and there's a media report out there that's circulating, giving misinformation, here are the correct figures, so to whoever it is that could go out and counteract that, so the public and the Australian public have the correct information? And if there isn't, why? And I was going to add, can I just add one more? If there isn't, why isn't there? Because that's like someone discrediting your work, which would be, I think, most occupations and most industries, you'd want to make sure that that doesn't happen.
So I guess we don't have a formal process for, addressing all the misreporting and misinformation. I feel like it's our, role to correct interpretation, as long as we make it very clear what the correct is. And I guess we work with our Home Affairs colleagues and Treasury colleagues as well. And, they, I guess, are in a similar mind that we provide as much information as possible, and our reporting of it is the accurate reporting. And but we don't feel that it's our direct role to reach out to every journalist or I guess any social commentator using our statistics, but we do our best, and we do it in a way that's accessible to everyone. So we will put out a media statement where we feel that it's suitable. We have other avenues, but we don't individually contact authors.
Thank you. Thank you for that. The Deputy Chair has a question in the last 2 minutes that we have before we call it quits. We've gone 15 minutes over time, and we apologise for the delay that we had with the division. Last question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking at some of the data in the ABS submission, and we see that only 89% of migrants were listed as speaking English well or very well. I'm interested, and that was part skilled and part humanitarian as well. I'm interested in, firstly, how do you assess that? And secondly, what you think would be the reason behind that discrepancy and why that wouldn't be 100%?
That question, that's from the Act, that would come from the linked census migration data set, and that's a census question, English language proficiency, and it's self-assessed. So people assess how well they speak English with that scale of response. And so it is self-assessed, and some people might be harder on themselves than others. So we just... I think it's just self-reported, and that's why there'd be that discrepancy.
So, Ms. Doback, that would mean that if it's self-assessed, that figure could either be higher or lower.
It could be. I mean, if there was a way that we could assess everyone through an objective measure, that that might be a difference. You might get a different result, but it's comparative. So some people might think that, if they can go out and do the shopping, then they speak English very well. Others might think that that's not good enough for work or for whatever other purpose they're thinking about when they answer that question. Yeah, I think the short answer is because it's self-reported.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Being 11 a.m, that brings us to a close. We thank you very much for appearing today. Apologies for the bells that rang and the small division that we had, but that was totally out of our control. If you've been asked to provide some additional information, please send it to the Secretariat if you can by Friday the 1st of May. And I think there is a couple of things there that we will be looking forward to receiving from you. Finally, I'd like to thank you for appearing. We may call upon you again. If there's any transcript, you'll be sent a copy of the transcript of your evidence, and you'll also have an opportunity to request any corrections if you feel the transcription may have some errors in it. On that note, thank you very much. We thank Hansard for keeping a true and accurate record today, to the colleagues that are here, members of the public, the Secretariat for organising it all, and I declare this public hearing closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.